the key stuck in the lock for the third time. And Marco wondered if this was some kind of cosmic sign that moving to Seattle had been a mistake. "Come on," he muttered, jiggling the brass key his new landlord had given him just an hour ago. The hallway of the old Victorian conversion smelled like coffee and something floral lavender. Maybe, and through the door of apartment 3B, he could hear the faint strains of indie music playing. The lock finally gave way with a satisfying click, and Marco pushed open the door to his new home. Well, half his home. The Craigslist ad had been clear. Asterisk roommate wanted for spacious to be our apartment in Capitol Hill. $1,200 per month includes utilities. LGBT friendly. Must be clean. Respectful and okay with a cat. Asterisk Marco was all of those things. And he desperately needed a place after his job transfer came through faster than expected. He'd seen exactly 3 photos of the apartment: a living room with exposed brick, a kitchen with white subway tiles, and a bathroom with one of those old clawfoot tubs before wiring his deposit. His mother had called it reckless. Marco called it adventure. The apartment was quiet as he dragged his first suitcase inside. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating hardwood floors and the promised exposed brick wall. The living room was tastefully decorated: a gray sectional, some plants that actually looked alive, and bookshelves crammed with paperbacks and vinyl records. "Hello?" Marco called out, but received no answer except for a small gray cat that appeared from the hallway, tail high, meowing imperiously. "You must be the famous Poe," Marco said, crouching down. The cat sniffed his extended fingers, deemed him acceptable, and rubbed against his leg. At least someone was happy to see him. Marco was on his 3rd trip up the stairs, hauling a box of kitchen supplies he'd probably never use, when he heard the apartment door open behind him. "Oh, you must be Marco." The voice was warm and slightly breathless, and when Marco turned around, he nearly dropped the box. The man standing in the doorway of apartment 3B was not what Marco had expected. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, pushed back from a face that could have sold cologne or artisanal coffee or possibly sin itself. He wore a fitted black t-shirt and jeans, and was holding grocery bags in both hands, looking at Marco with eyes so blue they seemed almost unreal. Yeah. Hi." Marco's eloquence had apparently stayed in California. "I'm Marco. Adrian." The man Adrian smiled, and Marco felt something flutter in his chest that definitely wasn't altitude sickness. "Sorry I wasn't here when you arrived. I had a client meeting that ran long." "Here, let me help you with that." Before Marco could protest, Adrian had set down his groceries and taken the box from Marco's arms like it weighed nothing. "You didn't have to, it's no problem. Besides, I should probably show you around properly." Adrian headed up the stairs, and Marco followed, trying very hard not to notice the way Adrian's shoulders moved under that t-shirt. This was his roommate, his straight roommate probably, who he was absolutely not going to develop an inappropriate crush on within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. Absolutely not. By the time Marco had hauled in the last of his boxes, the sun was setting, painting the apartment in shades of amber and gold. Adrian had helped with the heavy lifting, then disappeared into the kitchen to make dinner. "You like Thai food?" Adrian called out, and Marco followed the sound of his voice to find his new roommate standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled incredible in a wok. "Love it," Marco said, leaning against the doorframe. "You didn't have to cook, though." "I was making it anyway," Adrian said with a shrug. "Besides, first night in a new place? You should have something better than takeout." He glanced over his shoulder, and that smile again, the one that made Marco's heart do a stupid little flip. "Plus, I wanted to make a good impression. Some roommates are nightmares. I'm trying to prove I'm only mildly annoying." Marco laughed. "So far, you're setting the bar impossibly high. Help moving boxes and homemade dinner? I'm going to be disappointed when I find out you have some horrible secret habit." "Oh, I have many horrible habits," Adrian said seriously. "I sing in the shower. Badly. I sometimes leave my coffee cups in weird places. And I have an unfortunate addiction to true crime podcast, which I listen to at concerning volumes while doing dishes. All forgivable offenses," Marco said, grabbing plates from the cabinet Adrian pointed to. "I leave my wet towels on the bathroom floor. I'm a blanket hog even when sleeping alone, and I can't cook to save my life. So prepare for a lot of cereal dinners on my end. See, we'll balance each other out." Adrian divided the pad thai between their plates, adding extra lime to his own. "Come on, let's eat on the couch. I want to hear about why you moved to Seattle." They settled on opposite ends of the sectional, Poe immediately claiming the space between them. The food was incredible, perfectly balanced, sweet, sour, and spicy, and Marco found himself relaxing for the first time in days. "So," Adrian said, twirling noodles around his fork, The mysterious Marco. What brings you to the rainy city? Work. Mostly, Marco said. I'm a graphic designer, and my company opened a new office here. They offered me a position on the creative team, and I figured why not? I've been in San Diego my whole life. Time for a change. Big change, Adrian observed. From sunshine to rain. Do you have people here? Friends, family? Not really. I know exactly one person. My friend Riley from college moved here a few years ago. But that's it. Marco took a sip of the beer Adrian had offered. What about you? Are you from Seattle? Born and raised, Adrian said. Fourth generation, actually. My great-grandparents immigrated from Italy and opened a restaurant in Pioneer Square. It's still there. My cousin runs it now. That's amazing, Marco said. I can barely keep a houseplant alive, and your family has kept a business going for generations. Adrian laughed. The sound rich and genuine. Don't be too impressed. I've killed every plant I've ever owned. Poe is only alive because he's spiteful and self-sufficient, as if summoned. The cat meowed and began grooming himself aggressively. What about you? What does your family think about the big move? Marco's expression must have shifted, because Adrian immediately looked apologetic. Sorry, you don't have to know. It's fine, Marco said quickly. My family is complicated. My parents are very traditional, very Catholic, and very not accepting of certain things. Adrian's eyes held understanding. Yeah. Marco focused on his food. We don't really talk anymore. Haven't for about 3 years now. So this move it was freedom, I guess. A fresh start where I don't have to hide who I am. I'm sorry, Adrian said quietly. That's their loss, though, truly. The sincerity in his voice made Marco look up. Adrian was watching him with something soft in his expression. Something that made Marco's chest feel tight. Thanks, Marco managed. What about you? Are your parents still around? My mom is. She lives in Ballard with her girlfriend. Marco blinked. Her girlfriend. Yep, she came out when I was 15. Left my dad, found herself. Met Carol at a pottery class. They've been together for 12 years now. Adrian smiled fondly. My dad was shocked, but he got over it. He's remarried now to a nice man named Steven who makes terrible jokes and excellent lasagna. Wait, Marco set down his fork. So both your parents are gay? Apparently, I'm just genetically predisposed to excellent taste, Adrian said with a grin. The universe looked at my family tree and said, you know what? Let's make this interesting. Are you? Marco started, then caught himself. Sorry, that's none of my business. Am I gay? Adrian finished, not looking offended. I'm bi, actually. Equal opportunity disaster in relationships, regardless of gender. Marco's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. His beautiful roommate was bisexual. His beautiful, funny, kind roommate who cooked amazing food and helped carry boxes and had a cat named after Edgar Allan Poe. This was either the best or worst thing that could have happened. Disaster? Marco asked, aiming for light and casual. That bad? Let's just say my last relationship ended with my ex throwing all my clothes out the window of our 4th-floor apartment, Adrian said dryly. I lost my favorite jacket that day. Some jogger probably found it and is living their best life. Marco laughed despite himself. What did you do? Existed, apparently. Dylan was. Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. He was intense, jealous, controlling. I thought I could fix things. But you can't fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. Eventually, I realized I had to leave before I lost myself completely. I'm sorry, Marco said. That sounds awful. It was a learning experience, Adrian said philosophically. Now I know what red flags look like. And I know I'd rather be alone than with someone who makes me feel small. He stood, collecting their plates. Anyway, that's enough of my trauma for your first night. Want to watch something terrible on Netflix? Absolutely, Marco said, helping clear the dishes. As Adrian washed and Marco dried, falling into an easy rhythm they'd somehow established in just a few hours. Marco couldn't help but think that moving to Seattle was already the best decision he'd ever made, even if it might also break his heart. Chapter 2. Settling in. His first week in the apartment passed in a blur of unpacking, exploring the neighborhood, and getting used to his new office. Marco's job was demanding, but exciting. The Seattle team was working on a campaign for a local sustainable fashion brand, and he was thrilled to be part of the creative direction. But the best part of each day was coming home to apartment 3B. Adrian was a photographer. Marco learned, specializing in architectural and editorial work. He kept irregular hours, sometimes leaving before dawn to catch the perfect light. Other times working late into the night in the spare bedroom he'd converted into a studio. And darkroom. They developed a routine quickly. Morning coffee together when their schedules aligned. Adrian teaching Marco how to use the temperamental espresso machine. Dinner together several nights a week. Sometimes Adrian cooked, sometimes they ordered in. Late-night conversations on the couch, potpourring between them. Talking about everything and nothing. Marco learned that Adrian took his coffee black, but his tea with honey. That he was afraid of spiders but would carefully catch and release them rather than kill them. That he'd wanted to be a marine biologist until he'd gotten seasick on a whale watching tour in the 8th grade and decided to stick to land-based careers. And Marco was absolutely, definitely, catastrophically developing feelings for his roommate. It happened in small moments. Adrian laughing at something on his phone and reading it aloud to Marco, because he wanted to share the joy. Adrian making extra coffee in the morning and leaving it in a travel mug by the door when Marco was running late. Adrian remembering that Marco liked Thai iced tea and bringing one home as a surprise. After a particularly tough day at work. It was torture. Beautiful, wonderful torture. You're being an idiot, Riley said when Marco finally confessed over drinks at a Capitol Hill bar. Riley was exactly as Marco remembered from college, sharp-witted, impeccably dressed, and completely incapable of sugarcoating anything. I know, Marco groaned, dropping his head to the bar. But what am I supposed to do? He's my roommate. If I make things weird, I have to move out, and I can't afford to break my lease. Or, Riley said slowly, you could consider the possibility that he likes you too. Marco lifted his head. What? No. Why would you think that? Because of literally everything you just told me. Riley counted on their fingers. He makes you coffee. He cooks you dinner. He bought you your favorite drink just because. He told you about his disaster ex, which means he's comfortable being vulnerable with you. Marco, these are not just roommates' behaviors. We're friends, Marco protested weakly. Friends do nice things for each other. Friends do not look at each other the way you described him looking at you when you were wearing that tank top. Marco felt his face heat. That had been an incident. He'd been working out in the living room. His bedroom was too small for yoga. And Adrian had come home early. Marco had been in the middle of a downward dog, wearing only running shorts and a tank top. And when he looked up, Adrian had been standing in the doorway with an expression that Marco had tried very hard not to read too much into. He was probably just surprised to find me using the living room as a gym. Marco said. Riley gave him a look that suggested they were questioning all of Marco's life choices. You're hopeless. Look, do you want to spend the next year pining away like some Victorian maiden? Or do you want to actually do something about this? Like what? Hey Adrian, I know we've only lived together for a week, but I think you're incredible and I can't stop thinking about you. Yes. Riley threw up their hands. Exactly that. Minus the desperate tone, maybe add some confidence. That's insane, no. Moving to a new city and immediately falling for your emotionally available, bisexual, gorgeous roommate who cooks you dinner is insane. Actually telling him about it is just honest communication. Marco stared into his drink. Riley made it sound so simple, but the reality was terrifying. What if Adrian didn't feel the same way? What if it ruined their friendship? What if Marco was reading everything wrong and Adrian was just being a good roommate? And Marco was projecting his own feelings onto innocent gestures. I'll think about it, Marco finally said. You're going to think yourself into a panic attack, Riley predicted. But fine. Think about it. Just don't take too long. Because life is short and happiness is rare, and you deserve to take a chance on something good. Marco was still thinking about Riley's words 3 days later, as he stood under the spray of the shower, letting hot water work the tension from his shoulders. It had been a brutal day at work. The client had hated their initial concepts, his art director had been in a mood, and Marco had stayed to hours late trying to salvage the project. He was exhausted, frustrated, and wanted nothing more than to wash the day away. The bathroom was filling with steam, the old ventilation fan doing little to clear it. Marco had learned that this was one of the quirks of the apartment. The bathroom got incredibly steamy, like a sauna, which Adrian apparently loved and Marco was starting to appreciate. He was shampooing his hair, eyes closed, when he heard the bathroom door open. Sorry. Adrian's voice came through the steam. I just need to grab Mayo. Marco froze, said sliding down his face. The shower curtain was opaque, but still. Adrian was in the bathroom, while Marco was naked. This was fine. This was a normal roommate thing that sometimes happened in shared apartments. It's okay. Marco called back, trying to sound casual and not like his heart was attempting to break free from his chest. I'll just be a few minutes. Take your time, Adrian said, and Marco heard him moving around, presumably finding whatever he'd come in for. Then the bathroom door closed, and Marco let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Except he realized after a moment the shower was still running. He was still there, and he hadn't heard the main door close, which meant Adrian was still in the bathroom. Adrian, Marco ventured. Yeah? Adrian's voice was closer than expected, maybe near the sink. Did you? Are you still here? I am. A pause. Is that okay? I thought I'd brush my teeth while you finish up. Efficient use of bathroom time and all that. It was a perfectly logical explanation. They shared one bathroom. Sometimes schedules overlapped. This was fine. Except Marco's imagination was now very helpfully providing images of Adrian standing just a few feet away, separated only by a shower curtain and steam. And this was very much not fine. Sure, Marco managed, hoping he sounded normal. Makes sense. He finished washing his hair quickly, trying not to think about the situation, which of course meant he couldn't think about anything else. He was very aware of the sounds of Adrian moving around, the water running in the sink, the tap of a toothbrush against porcelain, the rustle of Adrian's clothes as he moved. Marco turned off the water and reached for his towel, then realized with horror that it was hanging on the back of the door, which meant he'd have to open the shower curtain and reach past Adrian to get it. Marco said eloquently. What's wrong? Adrian asked, and he sounded amused. My towel is on the door. Oh, here. Footsteps, and then Adrian's hand appeared through the gap in the shower curtain, holding out the towel without looking in. One towel delivery. Thanks, Marco said, taking it and wrapping it around his waist before pulling back the curtain. The bathroom was thick with steam, turning everything soft and dreamlike. Adrian was leaning against the sink, toothbrush in hand, and when he saw Marco, he went very still. Marco was suddenly acutely aware that he was wearing only a towel, water still dripping from his hair, skin flushed from the hot shower. Adrian's gaze tracked a droplet as it slid down Marco's neck, over his collarbone, down his chest, and Marco watched Adrian watch him. And the air in the room suddenly felt charged with something that had nothing to do with the steam. Sorry, Marco said, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. Marco. Adrian's voice was rough, and he set down his toothbrush. Can I ask you something? Marco's heart was thundering. Okay, that day when I came home and you were doing yoga, you thought I was looking at you weird, didn't you? Oh God, they were really doing this. Now, when Marco was half naked and still dripping wet, maybe. Marco admitted. I was. Adrian took a step closer, and then another, until he was right there, close enough that Marco could see drops of water on Adrian's own shirt from the humidity, close enough to see that his eyes were dark and intense. Do you want to know why? Marco couldn't find words, so he just nodded. Because you're beautiful, Adrian said simply. Because I've been trying so hard to be respectful and give you space and not make you uncomfortable. But Marco, you make it really difficult when you do things like yoga in tight shorts or wear that smile, or exist in my general vicinity. I what? Marco's brain was short-circuiting. I like you, Adrian said. I have since the day you moved in and looked at me like I'd handed you the moon when all I did was carry a box. And I've been trying to figure out if you might like me too, or if I was just seeing what I wanted to see. You like me, Marco repeated. Like saying it out loud would make it real. So much is stupid, Adrian confirmed. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement. And when Marco didn't pull away, Adrian's fingers traced the line of water down Marco's neck, following the path his eyes had taken moments before. Tell me I'm not imagining this. You're not, Marco breathed. Adrian, but he never got to finish the sentence. Because Adrian closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, giving Marco every opportunity to pull away. But Marco had no intention of pulling away. He'd been imagining this for a week, dreaming about it, wanting it, now that it was happening. It was somehow better than any fantasy. Marco's hands found Adrian's shirt, fisting in the fabric and pulling him closer. Adrian made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into Marco's wet hair, the other settling on his waist, warm against his bare skin. Marco's back hit the bathroom wall, and Adrian pressed against him, and the kiss turned heated, desperate, weeks of tension finally breaking free. Adrian's mouth moved to Marco's jaw, his neck, finding sensitive spots that made Marco gasp. Is this okay? Adrian murmured against his skin. Yes, Marco managed. More than okay. Adrian pulled back just enough to look at him, and his eyes were dark with want. Good, he said, and kissed him again. They might have stayed there forever. Steam and heat and the press of bodies, but eventually Adrian pulled back, breathing hard. We should probably, he gestured vaguely toward the door. Before we fog up the entire apartment? Marco laughed, still dizzy from kissing, from the reality of Adrian wanting him back. Probably. But neither of them moved, caught in the moment, in the certainty that something had shifted irrevocably between them. Marco, Adrian said softly, I don't want this to be just. I don't do casual. Not with you. If we're doing this, I need you to know that I'm all in. Good, Marco said, reaching up to cup Adrian's face. Because I'm already falling for you. And I don't know how to do that halfway. Adrian's smile was brilliant, beautiful, and he kissed Marco once more, tender and sweet. Then let's fall together. Chapter 3. Everything changed. They finally made it out of the bathroom. But only barely. Marco changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and when he emerged from his bedroom, Adrian was waiting in the hallway, freshly showered himself, hair damp and curling at the ends. Hi, Adrian said. Like they hadn't just made out in a steam-filled bathroom. Like the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Hi, Marco replied, suddenly shy despite everything that had just happened. So, Adrian said, leaning against the wall with studied casualness, want to talk about this? Or we could just pretend nothing happened and live in exquisite tension forever. Marco laughed, the sound breaking the odd formality between them. Let's not do that second thing. Good choice. Adrian held out his hand and Marco took it, letting himself be pulled into the living room. They settled on the couch, turned toward each other, close but not quite touching. Poe immediately jumping up to supervise. I meant what I said, Adrian started. I like you. A lot. But I also like living with you. And I like being your friend. And I don't want to rush into something that might mess all that up. But, Marco prompted, because he could hear one coming. But I also think we'd be stupid not to try this. Adrian finished. Life's too short to not take chances on good things. And Marco, I think we could be really good. Marco studied Adrian's face, the hope there, but also the caution, the hint of fear. Marco recognized it because he felt it too. They were both standing at the edge of something, deciding whether to jump. I think so too, Marco said finally. And yeah, maybe it's complicated because we live together. But, we're both adults. We can navigate this. He squeezed Adrian's hand. I want to try. With you? Adrian's smile was like sunrise, slow, and then all at once. Yeah, Marco confirmed. Though maybe we should set some ground rules. Since we're living together. Smart, Adrian nodded. Okay, rules. If things get weird, we talk about it immediately. No letting stuff fester. Agreed. And we maintain our own spaces. Just because we're together doesn't mean we need to be joined at the hip. We split dates. Adrian added. I don't want this to be about anyone paying for anyone. We're equals. We're honest, Marco said. About feelings, about needs, about when something isn't working. And we take it slow. Adrian said, then laughed. Or slower than making out in a bathroom, at least. Marco felt his face heat. Yeah, maybe. They hammered out a few more details they'd tell their friends but keep it relatively quiet for now. They'd have regular check-ins about how things were going. They'd maintain date nights even though they lived together. This is very mature of us, Adrian observed. I'm slightly suspicious. We're learning from past mistakes, Marco said. Also, I really don't want to lose this. Whatever this becomes. Adrian pulled him closer until Marco was tucked against his side. Head on Adrian's shoulder. You won't, he promised. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that for a while, comfortable silence settling over them, punctuated only by Poe's purring and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Can I ask you something? Marco said eventually. Anything. That thing you said about your ex. About feeling small. Did he? Marco hesitated. Did he hurt you? More than just throwing your clothes out a window? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Not physically, he said finally, but emotionally. Yeah. He was good at making me doubt myself. At making me think that his jealousy was proof of love. That his controlling behavior meant he cared. It took my friend staging an intervention for me to realize how bad it had gotten. I'm sorry. Marco said quietly. It's okay. I mean, it's not okay. But I'm okay now. Therapy helped. Time helped. Adrian's arm tightened around Marco. But that's why I'm so serious about communication. About honesty. I never want to make anyone feel the way Dylan made me feel. And I never want to feel that way again. You won't? Marco promised. Not with me. I'll call you out if you're being ridiculous. And I expect you to do the same. Deal? Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of Marco's head. Casual and sweet. And Marco's heart did that stupid fluttering thing again. This was real. This was happening. Marco was dating his roommate, and it was terrifying and wonderful and perfect. Hey, Adrian said after a while. What are you doing this weekend? Nothing concrete. Why? Let me take you out. A proper date. Dinner, maybe a walk around the sculpture park, whatever you want. Marco pulled back to look at him. You're asking me on a date? I am indeed. Marco, would you do me the honor of accompanying me on a romantic evening this Saturday? I would love to, Marco said, grinning. Though you know this is kind of backwards, right? Usually people go on dates before they make out in bathrooms. We're innovative. Adrian said seriously. Pioneers. Future generations will study our methods. Marco laughed and kissed him. Just because he could now, and Adrian pulled him closer. And it was perfect. Chapter 4. First date's eternity arrived cloudy and cool. Typical Seattle weather. Marco changed his outfit 3 times before finally settling on dark jeans, a blue button-down that Riley had once said matched his eyes, and a leather jacket he'd bought in a fit of confidence and never actually worn. Adrian had been mysterious about their plans, only telling Marco to dress nice but comfortable and to bring a jacket. He'd left early that morning with his camera bag, saying he had a shoot, but promised to be back by 5. Marco spent the day cleaning the apartment and trying not to obsess over the fact that this was his first real date in over a year. His last relationship had ended badly. A guy named Chris who'd seemed perfect until Marco had realized he was also dating to other people and hadn't mentioned it, and Marco had been gun-shy about dating since. But this was Adrian. Sweet, funny, honest Adrian, who made Marco coffee and talked about feelings and kissed like it was an art form. At for 30. Marco's phone buzzed. Adrian. Running a few minutes late. Client wanted extra shots. Be there soon, I promise. Marco. No problem. Take your time. Adrian. You look beautiful, by the way. Marco. You can't see me right now. Adrian. Doesn't matter. You always look beautiful. Marco was grinning at his phone like an idiot when the apartment door opened and Adrian walked in, camera bag over his shoulder and slightly out of breath. Sorry, he said, but stopped when he saw Marco. Okay, I was right. You do look beautiful. Adrian was still in his work clothes, black jeans and a gray Henley, but somehow made it look effortlessly stylish. His hair was windswept, his cheeks flushed from rushing, and Marco wanted to kiss him. So he did. Crossing the living room and pulling Adrian down by his collar, Adrian made a surprised, pleased sound and wrapped his free arm around Marco's waist. When they broke apart, he was smiling. Hi, he said. Hi, Marco replied. You said I look beautiful. Thought you deserved a reward. I'm going to compliment you all the time if this is what happens. Give me 10 minutes to change, Adrian said, setting down his camera bag. Then I'm taking you on the best first date Seattle has to offer. Adrian's idea of the best first date included a reservation at a small Italian restaurant in Pioneer Square, walking distance from his family's place. I pulled some strings, Adrian admitted as they were seated at a corner table with a view of the water. My cousin owed me a favor. The restaurant was intimate and warm with exposed brick walls, string lights, and the kind of atmosphere that made you want to lean close and share secrets. Their waiter brought bread and olive oil, took their drink orders, and left them with menus and knowing smiles. This place is beautiful, Marco said, looking around. Do you come here often? Sometimes. Usually for family dinners when my mom insists we all get together. Adrian grinned. Fair warning, if we're still together by Thanksgiving, you'll probably be conscripted into the family gathering. My mother takes no prisoners. If we're still together. Marco repeated, raising an eyebrow. Not feeling confident? Oh, I'm feeling very confident, Adrian said, reaching across the table to take Marco's hand. But I didn't want to presume. Maybe you'll realize I'm actually terrible and run screaming. I've seen you sing in the shower. Marco pointed out. If that didn't scare me off, nothing will. Hey, my shower singing is charming. Your shower singing sounds like a cat being strangled. Poe is concerned. Adrian laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and Marco felt something subtle in his chest. This was easy. Natural, like they'd been doing this forever instead of for the first time. They ordered pasta for Adrian, risotto for Marco, and talked about everything and nothing. Adrian told him about the architectural shoot he'd done that morning, capturing the interiors of a modernist house that was about to be demolished. Marco talked about the campaign at work, how they'd finally landed on a concept the client loved. Tell me something, Adrian said as their food arrived. Something I don't know yet. Something real, Marco considered while twirling pasta around his fork. Okay, when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, I told my mom I thought I might like boys. I didn't really know what it meant yet. Just that I thought my friend Daniel was really cute, and I wanted to hold his hand. Adrian listened, his attention completely focused on Marco. My mom cried, Marco continued. Not sad crying, I don't think. Though I thought it was at the time. I think she was scared. Scared for me. Scared of what it meant. She told me I was confused. That I'd understand when I was older. And then we never talked about it again. Marco, Adrian said softly. It's okay. Marco said quickly. I mean, it's not. But I've made peace with it. I spent years trying to be what they wanted, dated girls in high school. Thought maybe I could make myself straight through sheer willpower. It wasn't until college that I finally accepted who I was. And once I did, once I came out to my parents, well, you know how that ended. Their loss, Adrian said fiercely. Truly, because you're incredible, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you in their life. Thanks, Marco said, feeling tears prick at his eyes. Okay, your turn. Tell me something real. Adrian was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. After Dylan and I broke up, I didn't think I'd ever want to be in a relationship again. I was so angry, so hurt, and I was scared that I'd let someone treat me that way again. That maybe there was something broken in me that attracted that kind of person. Adrian, let me finish, Adrian said gently. I spent a year in therapy, working through all of it, learning to trust myself again, to recognize what healthy love looks like. And I decided that I'd rather be alone than settle for anything less than real. Less than someone who sees me and values me and wants to build something equal. He squeezed Marco's hand. And then you moved in, and you were kind and funny and so beautiful it hurt to look at you. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. Marco laughed wetly. That's what you thought when you met me. Among other things. I also thought, don't fuck this up, Adrian. Don't fall too fast. Take it slow. And then I proceeded to fall for you immediately anyway. I fell for you when you carried my box up the stairs, Marco admitted. And then again when you made me dinner. And again every day after that. We're disasters, Adrian said fondly, the best kind of disasters. They finished dinner slowly, savoring both the food and the conversation. Adrian told Marco about learning photography from his grandfather, about spending summers in the darkroom learning to develop film. Marco talked about his design work, the thrill of seeing his concepts come to life. Dessert was tiramisu they shared, feeding each other bites across the table. And Marco couldn't remember the last time he'd been this happy. Ready for part 2? Adrian asked after he'd paid the check, waving off Marco's protest. There's a part 2. There's always a part 2 in my dates, Adrian said seriously. I'm an overachiever. Part 2 involved the walk along the waterfront as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was crisp and cool, and Marco was grateful for his jacket for Adrian's arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. I want to show you something, Adrian said, leading Marco down a side street toward a small park overlooking the water. There, set up on a blanket with battery-powered lanterns and a thermos, was a perfect little picnic spot. When did you do this? Marco asked, amazed. This morning, before my shoot. I had to bribe a jogger to make sure no one took it. Adrian looked pleased with himself. Come on, I brought hot chocolate. They settled on the blanket. Marco tucked against Adrian's side, sharing hot chocolate spiked with peppermint schnapps as the city lights began to twinkle on around them. This is perfect, Marco said softly. Thank you. You're welcome. Adrian pressed a kiss to his temple. I wanted our first date to be memorable. Mission accomplished. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ferries cross the Sound, the lights of the city reflecting on the water. Marco felt peaceful in a way he hadn't in years. Like all the pieces of his life were finally falling into place. Can I ask you something? Adrian said after a while. Always. What do you want? Long term, I mean. Marriage, kids, white picket fence, or something else entirely? Marco considered the question. Honestly, I don't know about marriage. My parents kind of ruined that concept for me. But partnership, commitment, building a life with someone. Yeah, I want that. As for kids, he paused. I think I could want them with the right person. But I'm also okay if it's just us and maybe some pets. What about you? Similar, I think, Adrian said. I don't need the big wedding, but I want the commitment. The showing up every day. The choosing each other over and over. And I definitely want a dog. Maybe 2. 2 dogs and a cat. That's ambitious. I contain multitudes, Adrian said solemnly, then laughed. But seriously, I just want someone to build a life with. Someone to come home to. Someone who makes me want to be better. You make me want to be better too, Marco said quietly. You make me feel safe in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Adrian turned to face him fully, cupping Marco's face in his hands. Good, he said. Because you're safe with me, Marco. I promise you that. And then he was kissing Marco, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Marco kissed him back, pouring all his hope and fear and joy into it. They stayed in the park until the lanterns began to dim, wrapped in each other and a shared blanket, talking about dreams and fears and everything in between. When they finally headed home, hands linked, Marco felt like he was floating. Chapter 5. Morning after Marco woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, and the smell of coffee drifting through the apartment. For a moment, he was disoriented, and then the memories of the night before rushed back: the date, the park, coming home and kissing Adrian goodnight at his bedroom door despite both of them wanting more. They were taking it slow, or trying to. Anyway, Marco found Adrian in the kitchen, barefoot in sweatpants and a faded band t-shirt, making pancakes. Poe was sitting on the counter, supervising. Morning, Marco said. And Adrian turned with a smile that made Marco's heart skip. Morning. I hope you're hungry, because I got ambitious. Adrian gestured to the counter, where he'd set out blueberries, chocolate chips, and sliced bananas. Custom pancakes, your choice of additions. You're spoiling me, Marco said, but moved to the coffee maker to pour himself a cup. That's the plan, Adrian said easily. Fair warning. I'm going to be aggressively domestic until you're so used to it that you can't imagine living without me. Devious, Marco said, but he was smiling as he settled at the breakfast bar. Blueberry pancakes, please. They fell into easy conversation as Adrian cooked, and Marco was struck by how natural this felt. How right. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of just starting. What are your plans for today? Adrian asked as he plated the pancakes. Laundry, unfortunately. Maybe some reading. I have a few projects I should work on for work, but nothing urgent. Marco accepted his plate with a grateful smile. You? I need to edit yesterday's photos, but that won't take long. And then Adrian looked suddenly shy. I was hoping maybe we could do something together. If you want, no pressure. I'd love that, Marco said immediately. What did you have in mind? There's a used bookstore in Fremont I've been meaning to check out, and a farmer's market. We could make a day of it. Perfect. They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, Adrian editing photos in his studio, while Marco did laundry and caught up on emails. Around noon, they headed out, taking Adrian's car through the city. The bookstore was everything Marco loved, cramped and dusty, with shelves that reached the ceiling and stacks of books in every corner. They split up to browse, meeting occasionally to show each other finds. Look at this, Adrian said, holding up a vintage photography book. Ansel Adams, first edition. You have to get it, Marco said immediately. It's $50. And it's amazing. Get it. Adrian grinned and tucked the book under his arm. Only if you let me buy you something too. Marco ended up with a collection of Neruda poems and a graphic novel Riley had recommended. They left the bookstore with full bags and happy smiles, then spent an hour wandering the farmer's market, sampling cheese and buying fresh flowers. This is nice, Marco said as they walked back to the car, Adrian's hand in his. Just being together. No pressure, no agenda. That's the best kind of date, Adrian agreed. The kind where you're not trying to impress anyone. You're just existing in the same space. They loaded their purchases into the car, and Marco was about to get in when Adrian caught his arm and pulled him close, kissing him right there on the street, sweet and unhurried. What was that for? Marco asked when they broke apart. Just because I could, Adrian said. Because you're here and you're mine, and I'm really, really happy. Me too, Marco said softly. Me too. Chapter 6. Complications. Next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Marco settled into his job, made friends with his co-workers, and started to feel like Seattle was truly home. And through it all, there was Adrian, steady, sweet, perfect Adrian. They fell into a rhythm quickly. Mornings together when they could, coffee and quiet conversation before the day started. Dates once or twice a week, sometimes elaborate, sometimes just take out in a movie. And every night, they'd end up on the couch together, talking until late, stealing kisses, learning each other. They were taking things slow physically, lots of kissing. Some heated makeout sessions, but nothing more. It wasn't discussed explicitly, but Marco sensed Adrian's caution, his desire to build something solid before diving into the physical. Marco appreciated it, even as his attraction to Adrian grew more intense by the day. But 3 weeks into their relationship, things got complicated. Marco was working late at the office, finalizing a presentation for a big client meeting, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Hey Marco. It's Chris. I know we didn't end well, but I'm in Seattle for work this week. Would love to catch up if you're free. Marco stared at the message, a knot forming in his stomach. Chris, his ex, who'd been dating multiple people without telling any of them, who'd lied for months, who'd made Marco feel stupid for trusting him. He deleted the message without responding. But Chris didn't take the hint. Over the next few days, more messages came. Chris. Come on, Marco. I know I messed up. But can't we talk? Chris. I've changed. Therapy and everything. Just give me an hour. Chris. I miss you. Marco ignored all of them. But each message left him feeling unsettled, bringing back memories he'd worked hard to move past. He didn't tell Adrian about the messages. It seemed silly. Chris was in the past, and Marco had no intention of seeing him. Why worry Adrian over something that meant nothing? But on Thursday evening, as Marco was walking home from the office, he ran into Chris on the street. Marco. Chris looked the same: sandy hair, easy smile, the charisma that had first attracted Marco. I was just thinking about you, Chris. Marco kept his voice neutral. What are you doing here? Conference at the convention center. Boring corporate stuff. Chris fell into step beside Marco, ignoring the clear signals that Marco didn't want company. You look good. Seattle agrees with you. Thanks. Marco walked faster. Look, Chris, I really need to. Just give me 5 minutes, Chris said, his hand on Marco's arm. Please, there's a coffee shop right there. Let me apologize properly. And despite every instinct telling him this was a bad idea, despite knowing he should just walk away, Marco found himself agreeing. The coffee shop was crowded and loud, giving them a small table near the window. Chris bought their drinks. He remembered Marco's order, which felt both touching and manipulative, and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. I know I hurt you, Chris said. I know I lied. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Marco, I've been working on myself. Therapy, like I said. Understanding why I sabotage good things. And you were a good thing. The best thing. Chris, I'm not asking you to take me back, Chris said quickly. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that I hope you're happy. Marco studied him across the table. Chris looked sincere, but then again, he always had. That was part of the problem. I am happy, Marco said finally. I'm in a relationship, actually, with someone who's honest with me, who treats me with respect. Something flickered across Chris's face: disappointment, maybe, or frustration. That's great. I'm glad. He paused. Is it serious? Very, Marco said, and felt the truth of it settle in his chest. What he had with Adrian was real, was solid, was everything Chris had never been. Well, Chris stood, recognizing dismissal when he heard it. I really am glad you're happy, Marco. You deserve it. He handed Marco a business card. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Marco took the card out of politeness and watched Chris leave. Then he threw the card in the trash and headed home. Adrian was cooking when Marco got back, singing badly to music playing from his phone. The apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes. And Poe was doing figure eights around Adrian's legs, clearly hoping for scraps. Hey. Adrian's face lit up when he saw Marco. You're just in time. I'm attempting homemade pasta. It's either going to be amazing or a complete disaster. I have faith in you, Marco said. But his voice must have sounded off, because Adrian immediately set down his spoon and turned to him with concern. What's wrong? Nothing, Marco said automatically, then caught himself. They'd promised honesty. Actually, something weird happened. He told Adrian about Chris, the messages, the encounter. All of it. Adrian listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you tell me about the messages? Adrian asked when Marco finished. I didn't want to worry you, Marco said. It seemed like nothing, but it wasn't nothing. It was bothering you. Adrian's voice was gentle, but there was something else there too. Hurt, maybe. Marco, we talked about this. About being honest. I know. I'm sorry. You're right. Marco ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want you to think I was still hung up on my ex or something. Because I'm not. What I have with you is so much better than anything I had with Chris. I believe you, Adrian said. And he did look reassured. But Marco, even if it seems like nothing, I want to know what's going on with you. The good and the bad. That's what partnership means. You're right. I'm sorry. Marco closed the distance between them, wrapping his arms around Adrian's waist. I'll do better. I promise. We both will, Adrian said, kissing the top of Marco's head. We're learning, right? how to do this together. Yeah, Marco said, breathing in the scent of Adrian's cologne mixed with tomato sauce. We are. Chapter 7. The shower part 2 days later. Marco was having the worst day. Work had been a nightmare. The client had hated their latest concepts. His art director had blamed Marco, and he'd ended up staying late to completely redo the designs. By the time he got home, it was after 9. He was exhausted and frustrated, and all he wanted was a hot shower and to forget the day had happened. The apartment was dark when he let himself in, which meant Adrian was either out or already in bed. Marco didn't bother turning on lights as he made his way to the bathroom. Stripping off his clothes and stepping under the spray, the hot water was heaven, working the tension from his shoulders. Marco stood there for a long moment, letting it wash away the stress of the day, trying to quiet his mind. He was shampooing his hair when he heard the bathroom door open. Marco? Adrian's voice, concerned and soft. Yeah, Marco called back. Sorry, did I wake you? No, I was reading. I heard you coming. A pause. Are you okay? Bad day at work, Marco said, rinsing the shampoo from his hair. I'll tell you about it later. Okay, but Adrian didn't leave. Instead, Marco heard the door close, and then Adrian's voice was closer. Do you want company? Marco's heart stuttered. Company? Just, let me be here for you, if you want. Marco pulled back the shower curtain just enough to see Adrian standing by the door, still dressed, looking uncertain and hopeful and beautiful. You don't have to. Marco started. I know, Adrian said, but I want to. Let me take care of you? There was something in his voice, an intimacy that went beyond the physical, and Marco found himself nodding. Adrian smiled, soft and sweet, and started undressing. Marco watched, his breath catching as Adrian revealed the lean lines of his torso, the muscles in his arms, the scatter of freckles across his shoulders that Marco had never seen before. And then Adrian was stepping into the shower, pulling the curtain closed behind him. And they were standing under the spray together, water cascading over both of them. Hi, Adrian said softly. Hi, Marco replied. Suddenly shy despite everything, Adrian reached for the soap, lathering his hands. Turn around, Marco obeyed, and then Adrian's hands were on his shoulders, kneading the tight muscles there, working the stress away with sure, steady pressure. Marco couldn't hold back his groan of relief. That good? Adrian asked, sounding pleased. So good, Marco managed. How are you so good at everything? Years of practice and natural charm. Adrian worked his way down Marco's back, and it was perfect, intimate, but not sexual, caring without pressure. Just Adrian taking care of him, like he'd promised. When Adrian finished, Marco turned around, and they were suddenly very close in the small space, water streaming between them, steam rising around them like fog. Thank you, Marco said quietly. Always, Adrian replied. And then he was cupping Marco's face and kissing him. This kiss was different from the others, slower, deeper, full of promise and want. Marco wrapped his arms around Adrian's waist, pulling him closer. And Adrian made a sound low in his throat that went straight through Marco. Marco. Adrian breathed against his lips. Can I? Yes, Marco said, not even waiting for the rest of the question. Whatever you want. Yes? Adrian's hand slid down Marco's sides, over his hips, and Marco gasped at the feel of skin on skin. Nothing between them now except water and want. They kissed under the spray, hands exploring, learning the topography of each other's bodies. Adrian pressed Marco against the tile wall, and Marco could feel all of him, the evidence of Adrian's arousal against his own. And it was overwhelming in the best way. Tell me if I need to stop, Adrian murmured, his mouth on Marco's neck. Don't stop, Marco said. Please don't stop. Adrian's hand wrapped around both of them, and Marco actually whimpered at the sensation, his head falling back against the tile. God, you're beautiful, Adrian said, watching Marco's face. So beautiful like this. Marco couldn't form words anymore, could only hold on to Adrian's shoulders as pleasure built, as Adrian's hand moved in a steady rhythm that was going to break him apart. Adrian, he gasped. I've got you, Adrian said. Let go, baby. I've got you. And Marco did, falling over the edge with a cry. Adrian following moments later with Marco's name on his lips. They stayed pressed together under the spray, both breathing hard until the water started to run cold. Adrian shut it off and grabbed towels, wrapping one around Marco before attending to himself. That was, Marco started, then laughed. I don't have words. Good different or bad different? Adrian asked, suddenly looking vulnerable. The best different, Marco assured him, pulling him into a kiss. Perfect different. Adrian relaxed, smiling against Marco's lips. Good. Because I've been thinking about that for weeks. Only weeks. Try since the first day I moved in. Competitive, Adrian teased. I like it. They made their way to Adrian's bedroom, bigger than Marco's, with a king-size bed that looked incredibly inviting. Adrian lent Marco pajama pants, and they climbed under the covers together. Marco immediately curling into Adrian's side. Tell me about your day, Adrian said, fingers carting through Marco's damp hair. And Marco did, talking about the client meeting and the art director's blame, and his frustration with how the day had gone. Adrian listened, asked questions, offered perspective, and by the time Marco finished, the day didn't seem quite so awful anymore. Better? Adrian asked. Much better, Marco confirmed. You make everything better. That's my job now, Adrian said, pressing a kiss to Marco's forehead. Professional Marco life improver. Is the pay good? The benefits are excellent. Adrian pulled him closer. I get to hold you every night. Can't beat that. Marco fell asleep wrapped in Adrian's arms, feeling safer and more loved than he had in years. Chapter 8, Morning Realizations. Marco woke tangled in sheets that weren't his, in a bed that smelled like Adrian's cologne and laundry detergent. Sunlight filtered through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment, he was disoriented. Then he felt the arm around his waist, the warm body pressed against his back, and remembered Adrian, the shower, everything that had happened after. Marco rolled over carefully, not wanting to wake Adrian, and took a moment to just look at him. Adrian asleep was different from Adrian awake, softer somehow, younger. His usual confidence replaced by vulnerability. His dark hair was messy from sleep, falling across his forehead, and Marco resisted the urge to brush it back. I can feel you staring, Adrian mumbled, eyes still closed but smiling. Can't help it, Marco said. You're pretty when you sleep. Just when I sleep. Adrian cracked one eye open. You're pretty all the time. It's annoying. Adrian laughed and pulled Marco closer, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. Morning, Marco echoed, then hesitated. So, last night, regrets? Adrian asked, and there was a hint of worry in his voice that made Marco's heart clench. God, no. Marco said quickly, the opposite of regrets. I just wanted to make sure you don't have any. Marco. Adrian propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at him seriously. Last night was incredible. You're incredible, and I have zero regrets about any of it. Good, Marco said, relieved. Because I'd like to do it again, frequently, if you're interested. Oh, I'm very interested, Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave in a way that made Marco shiver. But first, coffee. And maybe breakfast. I can't be properly seductive on an empty stomach. They made it to the kitchen eventually, though there were several detours involving kissing against the hallway wall and Adrian lifting Marco onto the bathroom counter for more kissing before they finally made it to the coffee maker. We're going to be terrible at this, Marco observed, watching Adrian attempt to pour coffee while simultaneously trying to kiss Marco's neck. The productivity levels in this apartment are going to plummet. Worth it, Adrian said, finally succeeding in pouring 2 cups without spilling. Besides, who needs productivity when you can have this instead? This involved Adrian boxing Marco in against the counter and kissing him thoroughly, until Marco forgot why he'd ever thought coffee was important. They were interrupted by Marco's phone buzzing insistently on the counter. Adrian pulled back with a groan. Ignore it, he said. But Marco glanced at the screen and froze. It's my mom. The mood shifted immediately. Adrian stepped back, giving Marco space, and Marco stared at the phone like it might bite him. You don't have to answer, Adrian said gently, but Marco's hand was already reaching for the phone. Muscle memory from years of being a dutiful son overriding his instinct to let it go to voicemail. Mom. Marco. His mother's voice was the same as he remembered, cultured, cool, with the hint of an accent she'd never quite lost. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. No, it's fine. Is everything okay? Because his mother didn't just call. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Everything's fine. I wanted to reach out. I heard from your cousin that you'd moved to Seattle. For work. Marco closed his eyes. Of course his cousin had told her. Family gossip traveled at light speed. Yeah, I moved about a month ago. That's wonderful. A big opportunity, I'm sure. A pause. Your father and I would like to see you. We're going to be in Seattle next week for a conference. Perhaps we could have dinner. Marco felt like the ground was tilting under his feet. I don't think that's a good idea, Mom. Marco, please. It's been 3 years. We've all had time to think, to reflect. Can't we at least try to talk? He wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her that 3 years didn't erase what they'd said, how they'd made him feel. But he also felt that old, familiar pull, the child who always wanted his parents' approval. even knowing he'd never get it. I'll think about it, Marco heard himself say. That's all I ask. I'll text you the details. A pause. I've missed you, Marco. And then she was gone, leaving Marco staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. Hey, Adrian said softly, pulling Marco into a hug. You okay? I don't know, Marco admitted, burying his face in Adrian's shoulder. I don't know why I said I'd think about it. I should have just said no. Because they're your parents, Adrian said simply. And no matter how much they've hurt you, part of you still hopes they'll change. That's not weakness, Marco. That's human. I don't want to see them, Marco said. But I also. What if they have changed? What if this is a chance to fix things? Only you can decide that, Adrian said. But whatever you decide, I'm here. I'll go with you if you want backup. Or I'll help you craft a polite decline. Or I'll just hold you while you figure it out. Marco pulled back to look at him. How are you so perfect? Years of practice, Adrian said, echoing his words from the night before. And I'm not perfect, but I am here for you. Always. Chapter 9. Decisions. Marco spent the next few days in turmoil over his mother's call. On one hand, he knew seeing his parents was a bad idea. They'd made their position clear 3 years ago. They couldn't accept who he was. Couldn't accept his lifestyle choice, as they'd called it. They'd asked him to seek therapy to fix himself, and when he'd refused, they told him not to come back until he was ready to be the son they'd raised. Marco had walked away and hadn't looked back. It had hurt God. It had hurt so much, but it had also been necessary. He couldn't keep trying to earn love from people who'd made it conditional. But on the other hand, they were reaching out. His mother had said they wanted to talk. Maybe they had changed. Maybe 3 years had given them perspective. Or maybe they just wanted to try to change him again. You're spiraling, Riley observed when they met for drinks on Wednesday. I can actually see the thoughts racing through your head. I don't know what to do, Marco admitted. Part of me wants to hear them out, but part of me knows it's just going to end in more hurt. Then don't go, Riley said simply. You don't owe them anything, Marco. Not after what they put you through. But what if no? Riley's voice was firm. No what ifs. They had 3 years to reach out, to apologize, to show they've changed. And they waited until you moved across the country. That's convenient timing. Marco hadn't thought about it that way. You think they have ulterior motives? I think parents who truly want to reconcile don't wait 3 years and then drop a surprise dinner invitation. They apologize first. They acknowledge the hurt they caused. They ask if you're willing to have a conversation, not assume you'll show up. Riley softened. Look, maybe I'm being cynical. Maybe they have changed. But you need to protect yourself first. Adrian said something similar. Marco said that I need to decide what's best for me. Adrian's smart. Also, how are things going with Adrian? You've been suspiciously glowy lately. Marco felt his face heat. Things are good. Really good. Define good. Give me details. We're together. Officially. And it's... Marco struggled to find words. It's easy, you know? Being with him. It doesn't feel like work. It just feels right. You're in love with him, Riley said matter-of-factly. Marco started to deny it, then stopped. Was he? He thought about Adrian's laugh. The way he made coffee every morning. The way he listened when Marco talked. The way he'd held Marco after his bad day. Taken care of him. Made him feel safe and wanted and valued. Oh my God, Marco said. I'm in love with him. Congratulations on that revelation. Riley said dryly. We've all been waiting for you to catch up. So, have you told him? No. We've only been together for a few weeks. And, when you know, you know. Riley pointed at him with their drink. Don't make the same mistake you're making with your parents. Don't wait around assuming people know how you feel. Tell Adrian you love him. What if it's too soon? What if I scare him off, Marco? The man moved you into his apartment, cooks you dinner, and apparently gives excellent emotional support during family crises. I don't think telling him you love him is going to send him running. Marco sat with that for a moment. Riley was right. Adrian had shown him in 100 ways how he felt. Maybe it was time for Marco to do the same. Okay, Marco said. I'll tell him. Good. Now, about your parents. They talked through options for the next hour. By the time Marco left, he'd made a decision. He would meet his parents for dinner, but on his terms, in a public place with a clear exit strategy, and he'd bring Adrian for support. If his parents couldn't accept him and accept Adrian as part of his life, then this would be goodbye. For real this time. You want me to meet your parents? Adrian asked that night. Looking surprised, they were on the couch. Marco's head in Adrian's lap while Adrian played with his hair. It had become their default position for serious conversations. Only if you want to. Marco said quickly. I know it's a lot to ask, and we haven't been together that long. But Marco, Adrian's hand stilled in his hair. Of course I'll come with you. If you want me there, I'm there. No question. You're sure? I'm sure. Adrian leaned down to kiss him, soft and brief. Though I should warn you, I have a terrible habit of saying exactly what I'm thinking. If your parents say something awful, I might not be able to keep quiet. Good, Marco said. I'm tired of keeping quiet. They planned it out over the next few days. Marco texted his mother back, agreeing to dinner but insisting on a restaurant of his choosing, a popular Italian place in Fremont, public and busy, where there would be other people around if things got ugly. And he told her he was bringing someone. His mother's response had been a single "I look forward to meeting them," which told Marco nothing. The night before the dinner, Marco was a mess. He paced the apartment, changed his outfit 3 times, and generally drove both Adrian and Poe crazy with his nervous energy. Come here, Adrian finally said, catching Marco mid-pace and pulling him down onto the couch. You need to calm down. I can't, Marco said. What if this is a disaster? What if they say something horrible, and I lose my temper and ruin everything? Then we leave, Adrian said simply. Marco, you don't have to stay if they're cruel. You don't have to subject yourself to that. But what if they have changed? What if I'm about to get my parents back? Then that's wonderful, Adrian said. But hope for the best, prepare for the worst, right? He took Marco's face in his hands. Listen to me. No matter what happens tomorrow, you're still you. Still incredible. Still worthy of love. Your worth doesn't depend on your parents' acceptance. Marco felt tears prick his eyes. How do you always know exactly what to say? Because I see you, Adrian said simply. The real you. And the real you is pretty amazing. I love you, Marco blurted out, and then froze. Adrian went very still. What? Marco's heart was pounding. I love you. I know it's only been a few weeks, and maybe it's too soon to say it. But Riley said I should tell you, and I've been thinking about it, and I really think I do. I love you, and Adrian kissed him, cutting off his rambling, and when he pulled back, he was smiling like Marco had just given him the world. I love you too, Adrian said. I've been in love with you for weeks, but I didn't want to say it and scare you off. Really? Marco's voice came out embarrassingly small. Really? Adrian confirmed. Marco, you're it for me. I know it's fast, but I know what I feel. I love you. Marco kissed him again, pouring everything he felt into it, relief and joy and love. So much love it felt like it might spill out of him. We're idiots, Marco said when they finally broke apart. Both of us in love and scared to say it. We're perfect idiots, Adrian corrected. My favorite kind. They spent the rest of the night wrapped around each other, exchanging I love yous like they were precious gifts. And Marco felt some of his anxiety about the next day fade. Whatever happened with his parents, he had this. He had Adrian. And that was more than enough. Chapter 10. Meeting the Prince. The restaurant was crowded when they arrived. The Friday.